Again, welcome to another session of Coffee with Cleo. We have Dr. Jeneen Fields. She is a research scientist, a professor at Purdue University, and she's the first African American woman to receive, of course, a PhD in her field. Jeneen, I'd like to ask you a question, and this question is around attracting more minorities in the field of science.
Mhm.
How many minorities and females are in your field?
Well, if I talk specifically about plant breeding and genetics, there are many minorities, I would say, if we look at Asian and Indian and we look at Latino. However, if we look specifically at African Americans, there are three of us. There is one that works for the USDA. He's about 70 years old, Dr. Roy Scott. There is Dr. Keith King, who is a assessor for Allstate. And there is myself, three of us in the nation
So,
that I'm aware of.
so what do we need to do, or what would you, and things, probably things you're working on, I'm sure, to fill the pipeline of future research scientists in your field, or even around your field, the ancillary aspects that you could share that either are being done or would like to be done? What would
Well, right now,
you,
I would say there are, again, more scientists emerging. I'm aware of one young lady that graduated in agronomy last year, and she is a professor at a university. And there are some other emerging young ladies in the particular field of crop sciences that are minority and women. Happen to be specifically African Americans. But one of the things, again, that I think is valuable is to actually get students out to see what it is that you do. One of the things that I always make time for is actually to visit high schools and talk with them about the work that we have the joy of actually being a part of. Again, sharing with students the possibility of what careers can be is critically important. And it's interesting how some kids really look at you and say, "You can do that and make money?" Oh, and I say, "Well, yeah, do you realize you eat food every day and that food does not come from the grocery store? There are producers and scientists working in the background to make sure we have a healthy and viable food supply." But again, different programs. At Purdue, we're involved in a program where we directly work with students in Indiana. And in the summertime, we actually are teaching them principles of plant breeding and plant physiology so that they can again be exposed and learn. Myself, I'm actually working on some additional outreach activities and working on grant funding for those things, again to begin to expose minorities and particularly women. What I will say about women is this is a interesting field in that you have to be a woman with grit if you're going to be in agriculture.
yes.
And nothing wrong with having a little grit and still being somewhat delicate. Um, One of the things that I always tell students that number one, if you're going to be in agriculture, you have to be mobile. When you're graduating from college, the jobs are all over the nation, and your willingness to be able to move and go will allow you to eventually be able to make the decisions to be at a certain place. But you have to be willing to go to Texas or go to the Midwest and Iowa, different places like that to begin your career. The second thing is, I think versatility is really important, where you are able to go and sit in a meeting or teach at a meeting, but you're at the same time willing to just jump in and put your boots on
Yes.
and do a tour. All of those things are really important. But, again, exposing students early on, reaching out to both minorities and women, letting them know that this is a field and an opportunity for you to not only, make, I would say, a decent career in your life, but also like think about this. I've spent half of my life in the lab and half of my life outside playing in the field and get paid for it. So it's the best of both worlds when I think about it that way.
You know, leadership is about continuous learning, and the humility
Mm.
begins, it breeds curiosity, and
Mhm.
curiosity facilitates learning.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask this question of all of my guests. What is
Okay.
one lesson that you've learned early in your career that has
Mhm.
really helped propel you towards success, that you've realized it's your go-to lesson, and you're thinking, your lucky stars, you're thanking God that you have this lesson in your bailiwick or as an arrow in your quiver. And what is
Mhm.
one lesson that you wish you would have learned earlier?
Okay. When I think about a lesson that I learned early, and it wasn't, I would say, an easy lesson, it was to always be able to admit your mistakes. When I began, I would say my graduate studies, there were times where you kind of deal with that imposter syndrome earlier on. You're in graduate school, you're working on your master's degree, but do I really belong here? Am I as smart as all of the other people? And there would be times where maybe I didn't quite understand something, but I would kind of like sort of try to pretend because I was embarrassed to have to ask. And
Yes.
then I think one day it just dawned on me that you're in school. Like, why is it that you're afraid to ask?
Yes.
And then I would say a second situation was um, in statistics when we were in my PhD program. Um, for once, the graduate students got the clue that all of us were struggling through statistics. And we would sit down together and study, and everybody was able to grasp. It was like everybody had a little bit of what was necessary in order to make the whole group succeed. So I would say early on, kind of, and then all those lessons along the way, not being afraid to admit that you don't know something, because no one knows everything. And
True.
it's okay. And really adapting that philosophy, the only stupid question is one that you don't ask. Why would you sit in a situation,
Yeah.
not know, have someone around that knows, and not ask the question? And I think as people, we have to be more open to that. So that was something I would say I learned a little early on, and it really has helped me to do well. But also, I'm known for being very inquisitive, and I will be the one that asks the question. So everybody kind of looks and like, okay, Jeneen, she's going to ask that question. I
Right.
don't. I own it. Um, I would say something I wish I had learned earlier on was to stay focused on your life mission. That, and I will specifically say this, it is probably applicable to all people in one regard, but specifically as females, I think at times we can allow ourselves to not just allow life to flow its pace, but we feel like we have to do certain things at certain points in our life. And that can delay your professional progress, realizing that you could have it all. But I would say to really stay focused on whatever it is you know your life mission is, and make sure you have people around you that love you, that can tell you those good things and bad things that you need to kind of adjust and listen, because I had them and there were times where I listened and times where I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. And then 10 years later, I'm like, oh gosh, they really knew. So you have to have that kind of community around you that is able to speak truth to you and you actually listen. Um, hindsight is always 2020 for many of us, but the biggest thing I would say is that learning to keep your objectives and your goals front and center without distraction. And that doesn't mean you don't have a life. It just means that you keep recalibrating and say, okay, this is the focus. This is the focus.
You made a very good point about recalibration, life stage. At different periods of our life stage, we have a
Mhm.
different perspective. We bring different considerations, and as long as we understand that we have to adjust and adapt,
Oh, yeah,
but keep that focal point the same.
that focal point.
What you're saying and how I'm understanding it, I think is absolutely great advice. You
Yeah.
know, we're speaking today to Jeneen Fields, and very accomplished. She is the research scientist and
Mm.
professor at Purdue University in the Department of Botany and Pathology. And again, a trailblazer in her own right, being the
Thank you.
first African American woman in a nation to receive her PhD in plant breeding and genetics. And Jeneen, I want to thank you so much for being part of Coffee with Cleo platform. And any parting words for those aspiring individuals in their lives and their careers? Anything that you would like to share before we sign off?
I would just say for all of you students or aspiring scientists that find you have even an inkling of an interest in science, go ahead and go for it. There's so many world problems that need to be addressed because of just the nature of the world and how things are progressing. And it's going to take all of our minds, all of our effort, and all of our will to begin to address and help to solve some of these problems. So don't be afraid. I would say for the women, go ahead and study hard, do your best. And one of my favorite phrases is be velvet over steel. What that means is be tender and soft, but you be rock solid and get things done. And with that, I think that's about it. Thank you so much for having me, Cleo. This has been a pleasure.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you again, audience. Please enjoy Dr. Jeneen Fields, and may God bless until the next time we have Coffee with
Thank
Cleo.
you.
All the best.
Thank you. All the best, Cleo.